Level 1, the kid with the chatbot. You are 14 years old and you've just discovered you can talk to a chatbot for hours. Not because you're lonely, but because you're fascinated by the specific moments it breaks. The strange, confidently wrong answers. The way it sometimes contradicts itself 2 sentences later. You start trying to trick it on purpose, cataloging its failures in a notebook like a naturalist recording an unfamiliar species. Your parents assume you're just messaging friends. You don't correct them. You teach yourself to code from free tutorials at night, badly at first, copying examples you don't fully understand, and running them just to watch what happens. Half the time, nothing happens at all. Just a wall of red error, text you can't parse, and you sit with it anyway, rereading the same 3 lines until something finally shifts. Your first working program is nothing impressive, a script that generates random sentences, but the specific feeling of watching something you built actually produce output rewires something in you permanently. You show it to exactly one friend who is politely unimpressed. You don't care. You already know you're going to build another one tomorrow. Level 2, the undergrad. You are 19 and you've declared computer science, sitting in your first machine learning lecture, completely lost for the entire first month, watching equations fill a whiteboard faster than you can copy them, let alone understand them. You fail your first linear algebra exam badly enough that you seriously consider whether you're cut out for this. Sitting in your dorm room afterward doing the specific math of whether switching majors this late would even be possible. You don't quit. You spend an entire weekend rebuilding your understanding from scratch, watching the same concept explained 6 different ways online until one of them finally clicks. The relief of that moment almost physical. You train your first actual neural network on a laptop that overheats 20 minutes into every session, watching a loss curve slowly decline on a screen with something close to religious devotion. You start staying up specifically to watch numbers move, telling yourself you'll go to bed after the next epic finishes and never quite meaning it. Level 3, the junior engineer. You are 23 when you land your first real job at a small startup, officially an AI engineer now, a title that feels simultaneously earned and entirely fraudulent every time someone asks what you actually do. Your first project fails spectacularly, a model that performs beautifully in testing and falls apart completely the moment real users touch it, teaching you a lesson about the gap between clean data and the actual messy world that no coursework fully prepared you for. You learn to debug systems that don't fail with clear error messages the way traditional code does, but fail quietly, confidently, producing plausible-sounding garbage that takes hours to even recognize as wrong, let alone fix. You pull your first genuine all-nighter chasing a bug that turns out to be a single misaligned data column, discovering the specific, exhausted satisfaction of finally understanding exactly what went wrong after 7 straight hours of suspecting everything except the actual cause. You walk out at sunrise feeling simultaneously destroyed and completely alive. Level 4, the senior engineer. You are 29 and you've become the person junior engineers quietly seek out when something breaks in a way nobody can explain. Having developed an instinct for exactly where in a pipeline things tend to quietly go wrong. You ship a model to production that genuinely changes how thousands of people use a product. Watching usage metrics move in real time in a way that still doesn't feel entirely real to you, refreshing the dashboard more often than is strictly professional. You also ship a model that fails publicly and embarrassingly, generating outputs that make your company briefly, unpleasantly famous online for a weekend you'd rather forget. Screenshots circulating faster than your team can respond to them. You learn that this field moves fast enough that the specific techniques you mastered 2 years ago are already being quietly replaced. And staying relevant means accepting you'll be a permanent beginner at something indefinitely, no matter how senior your title eventually becomes. Level 5, the technical lead. You are 35 when you're given your first team to lead, discovering that the skills that made you an excellent individual engineer translate only partially into the completely different skill of helping other people be excellent engineers. You spend your first few months overcorrecting other people's code line by line before realizing slowly that the job now is mostly about asking the right questions rather than providing the right answers yourself, a shift that takes longer to accept than you expected it to. You navigate your first major technical disagreement with another lead. Both of you convinced your architecture is correct, discovering that being right technically and winning the actual argument are frequently two entirely different skills requiring an entirely different kind of preparation. You start mentoring the specific kind of talented, chaotic junior engineer that reminds you uncomfortably of yourself at 23, recognizing the exact expression of someone who just found their first impossible bug at 2 in the morning. Level 6, the principal engineer. You are 44 and your name is attached to systems used by millions of people who will never know it. Decisions you made years ago about architecture, an approach now embedded so deeply into the product that changing them would require rebuilding entire teams' worth of downstream work. You spend less time writing code yourself now and more time in rooms where the actual direction of the technology gets decided, a trade you didn't fully choose but gradually accepted, missing the specific satisfaction of a solved bug more than you expected to. You watch entire technical paradigms rise and fall during your tenure, approaches that once seemed permanent quietly abandoned within a few years, teaching you a specific kind of humility about certainty in a field that reinvents its own foundations roughly once a decade. You've learned exactly which technical fights are worth having and which ones are simply preferences dressed up as principles, a distinction that took 2 decades and several costly mistakes to actually internalize. Level 7, the veteran. You are 61, mostly consulting and teaching now, standing in front of a room of students building their first neural network on laptops that will overheat exactly the way yours once did decades ago. You watch one of them stare at a loss curve slowly declining with the exact expression you wore yourself, a mixture of confusion and something close to religious devotion, and you say nothing, letting them have the moment uninterrupted. You think sometimes about the 14-year-old cataloging a chatbot's failures in a notebook, fascinated by exactly the ways a system breaks. He had no real idea what he was actually building toward: the all-nighters, the models that failed publicly, the decade of paradigms rising and quietly falling, the specific discipline of remaining a permanent beginner in a field that refuses to hold still long enough to master completely. He just wanted to know why the chatbot said something strange. He had no idea yet that the question itself, asked honestly and repeatedly for 50 years, was always going to be the entire career, and that the not knowing, it turns out, was never actually the problem. It was always going to be the point.